Oh, yep. Okay. All right. Well, I've got my prop today, the PACOP morning teacup. I'd just like to welcome everyone to the July morning tea talk. My name's Janelle. I'm the Quality and Education Manager at PACOP, and with me is Laura. Give us a wave, Laura.
Hi, everybody.
She is a PACOP improvement facilitator and currently at home with COVID. So that's how hardcore and how dedicated our team is. And so welcome everyone else who's here. Today's morning tea talk is on the PACOP Outcomes Collection and what we call the ARP protocol, the Assess, Respond, Plan protocol. And basically it's our framework for standardising palliative care in aged care so that it's resident-centred and no one slips through the gaps. So let's begin. I always want to start with an acknowledgement of country and all the team at PACOP wishes to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as the traditional custodians of the lands we're meeting on today. And we want to pay our respects to elders past, present, emerging and future. So today we're going to just give an overview of the PACOP program, the full program, and talk about where outcomes fits in, how to enter into the outcomes collection. There are 4 tools and 4 steps in the outcomes collection, and also the ARP protocol I mentioned is about assessing and addressing those palliative care needs in a timely way. And we'll talk a bit about how it fits into the aged care quality standards as well. So PACOP is one program, but there are 2 parts to it. And the whole program is all about standardising care and palliative care in aged care. So it begins with the profile collection over here in the purple. The core activity of the profile collection is and this is coming out of the Aged Care Royal Commission, so that it's designed so that no resident falls through the gaps. And every resident is routinely and holistically assessed every 3 months. And it's a way of standardising assessment. So it wouldn't matter which aged care home you go into around Australia, you will all receive the same assessment. That has a wonderful way of building staff confidence, skills and knowledge, because it wouldn't matter where, and we all know that there's high turnover in aged care and with staff, so it wouldn't matter where that staff member went to, which aged care home, they will know and understand the standardised assessment of every resident. It builds a really wonderful clinical knowledge, but also a clinical language that is transferable and allows for better clinical handover, communication amongst teams, but also with relatives and families, and also communication with external palliative care providers. So that really builds that language. It also, the profile collection facilitates early identification of deterioration. Rather than letting a resident slowly deteriorate before our eyes, it picks up that deterioration and it gives a tool to help staff. It's a go-to tool when they're worried. If they say things like, Mary's just doesn't seem quite right. It's the go-to tool for them to use when they want to assess and see if there are needs identified. It also helps with comprehensive care planning. And the really cool thing is it has a unique decision-making tools to help staff know when their needs are increasing to the point where they really need comprehensive palliative care. So all of those things are facilitated through the profile. Now, the outcomes collection is the other part which makes up the whole PACOP program. So once needs are identified in the profile collection, they are then moved into the outcomes collection to receive palliative care. And so it's the core activity of the outcomes collection. It's called outcomes because the information gathered from assessments, we feed back to aged care homes and they can measure the outcomes from their care because their care is addressed through an evidence-based protocol. So they can look at how the resident was before and after, and we can help them quality improve based on the outcomes from care. So it involves point of care palliative assessments to look at their needs, symptoms, problems, and distress of both the resident and the family. It's really a holistic assessment. They're all evidence-based, and plus the timely responses to what you've assessed are addressed through the ARP protocol. And it involves a systematic methodology for quality improvement through reporting every 6 months of the outcomes from care back to aged care homes. So it's a really innovative program. So just to show you, this is step back, because if those of you if you haven't watched the previous morning tea talk was on the profile collection. So I encourage you to go to YouTube channel and have a look at that. And you'll get an overview of the profile collection if you want more information. But this is an example of one of the 3 monthly profile collection tool. Welcome, Priyanka. This is just to show you how the profile collection identifies the need for palliative care. So in this form where I've highlighted here, it's got a really unique decision tool that helps staff, and this is particularly for staff who aren't confident in palliative care or recognising palliative care needs. It really builds confidence in staff, but it's a unique decision-making tool with a series of questions that after the comprehensive assessment has been completed, you can say, I'll just answer these few questions. So this is in the profile collection. It helps you make a decision. Would this resident benefit from palliative care, and therefore the outcomes collection? So there's questions about ANAC Class 1, and that's for a new admission into aged care. ANAC is a type of the new funding model that's coming in October. You know, has the resident been admitted from a palliative care unit? Is there a palliative care plan developed? These questions seem quite obvious, but they're not obvious to everyone. But there's also acknowledgement of the clinical judgment of the person doing the assessment. And also, do you believe the resident has a prognosis of less than 3 months? Now that also matches with the ANAC assessment coming up as well, as does the AKPS results. So it's yes to any of those, and then yes to 2 or 3 of the assessments below. So they might have severe, so they have to need 2 out of 3. Severe symptom distress or problem severity. They can have an AKPS of 40 or less, and then there's a Rockwood clinical frailty scale. That's one of the tools used in the profile collection, and that's with a score of 8 or 9. So this really helps build confidence for the clinician to maybe call the GP and say, I've done this evidence-based form. It's said that they would benefit from palliative care, and it builds their confidence by talking about the scores. The other part of the profile collection is the action plan that's incorporated at the end. And here it helps make those decisions based on the whole of the assessment. This is only part of the 3 monthly assessment that is completed, but you can see here there's a section for commencing the outcomes collection. The other tool in the profile collection is the deteriorating resident tool. And as mentioned, that's the go-to tool whenever the resident is concerned, the clinician is concerned, or the family is concerned about a resident. And it just can be that niggling, even a gut feeling that you're just worried about the resident. So it's a very quick tool that goes through some really strategic assessments about frailty, performance, problems and symptoms. And again, it's got this section here about, it's a quick tick box of would this resident benefit from palliative care and therefore the outcomes collection? And it's pretty much the same as the one previously, except they don't need 2 out of 3 because the previous one is a routine assessment. This one has been called up because there is already a concern about a resident. They may have had increasing falls lately, or it could be any number of things. So here's another checkbox to, again, build confidence to refer on for palliative care. So the outcomes collection includes 4 tools and 4 steps as a way to standardise assessment of residents that have identified palliative care needs. So let's have a look at those things now. So the 4 tools some are very simple and some are clinical. But let's have a look. The first tool one is just the episodes. It's the bookends of the episode, what we are calling an episode of palliative care within their admission in the aged care home. And so, and at the start, we just asked for what was the main reason that the clinician thought the resident needed palliative care. So it's really drilling down, because they may have been admitted for other reasons, but the reason now might be something else clinically important. So we capture that. And then of course the end, start and end, there's the important bookends of the care episode. The other tool we use, we monitor symptoms, resident symptoms daily. And so that is also facilitated, which is wonderful, by the care workers and care staff, because, and let's acknowledge the hard work they do and the close contact they have with residents every single day, doing the actual care needs that they have, you know, toileting, transfers, dressing, you know, eating, all those things that are important. The care worker has that unique conversation with the resident as they're doing them, and that's part of daily SAS monitoring. So when they're in outcomes, their symptoms and the distress from those symptoms are monitored daily. There is also the outcomes full clinical assessment tool, and that is for healthcare professionals. So that's for the RNs or ENs to do. And that is a simple one pager, but it incorporates a suite of assessments, evidence-based assessments. So I'll take you through that shortly. And the resident snapshot assessment is that it's much like the profile collection continued. So if they've been in the outcomes collection for 3 months, it's a stop, it's a pause point, and it's the resident snapshot includes really important psychosocial, communication, wellbeing questions, as well as advanced care directive, just pausing and checking, do we have all their advanced care directives and all those communication orders in alternate decision makers, all those things in place. So today we're going to focus on the SAS and the full clinical outcomes assessment tool and the ARP protocol. So let's have a look. So the outcomes collection is not a big step for aged care homes. Once they've embedded, and an aged care home will always commence with the profile collection, and they can commence with them both at the same time. But the profile collection includes all the tools in the outcomes, and there's only one more to learn, which is the phase, which I'll cover briefly in this section. So the assessments, the evidence-based assessments that have been used for years, 15 years in our sister program, PACOP, that's the Palliative Care Outcomes Collaboration. They include measuring distress, resident distress from symptoms, and that's a resident-rated tool, which is really unique where possible. It measures problems and that's more about severity from the problems, and there are 4 domains there. It measures function and performance through the RUG-ADL and the AKPS. And finally, this is the new tool added for the outcomes collection, which is the phase, or the palliative care phase. And the phase is not like a phase of illness. The phase is about the clinical need at that time for the resident. And we'll talk about that briefly. And of course, frailty is measured in the Rockwood Clinical Frailty Scale, and that's in that routine monthly snapshot review, 3 monthly snapshot review. But basically, the outcomes is about resident-centered palliative care. And you'll see that unfold as we talk about how the outcomes works, and that the residents' needs entirely drive assessment frequency. So let's have a look. First of all, the daily SAS. As mentioned, this is a simple tool, and this is the large page here is the tool that can be left by the resident's bedside, and they can actually complete it themselves if able. If they're not able, it can be care worker assisted in that they help the resident describe their distress from a range of symptoms. And you can see there's 7 symptoms there. They include pain, fatigue, problems with breathing or your bowels, nausea, appetite, sleeping, and also it allows for the inclusion of an other, which is a physical or related to your mind symptom that is really distressing to the resident. And in our education for this, we really do like to teach that it's about what is distressing to the resident, what's bothering them, what's worrying them. So this is such a unique tool that really gets to the bottom of what is worrying for the resident. Because we might know as clinicians that a resident has pain, but it may not be bothering them. And the thing that might be bothering them is that they're really fatigued, and when their family come to visit, they just fall asleep and they miss their family. So they might say, yeah, I've got my usual hip pain or back pain, knee pain, but what really bothers me is that I'm sleepy all the time and I miss seeing my family. So it really helps drill down to what's important to the resident. And this is done daily. And we teach it to be done not like, okay, Mary, how's your pain? How's your fatigue out of 10? It's more as part of the conversation during routine care that we get residents to share their thoughts, concerns, worries about these symptoms. Down the bottom here, you'll see with the green moving over to red, it's part of the assess, respond, plan protocol. So it gives this care worker, if they're getting scores, if the resident's telling them a score, or I'll talk about proxy scoring in a moment, it helps them work out what do I do once I get that score? So there's an absolute clear guideline for how they report up what they find. So if they find, for example, a moderate score for pain, maybe the resident says, oh no, my pain's about a 7 out of 10. You can see there that they need to report that up to the RN within 30 minutes. So that's part of that resident-centered care where there's a clear protocol for what to do with an assessed score. They also have a tool, a little ruler that helps them get the results from the residents. So we have all these visual prompts as well for residents and for staff to help them know what to do with the scores they get, and also help them get the right scores from the resident. Now, we acknowledge in aged care as well that, residents may not be able to do their own scores. They live with dementia. And so there's a detailed guide on the back for proxy scoring as well. It's too small to look at today. The outcomes full assessment, as I've already mentioned, a simple one-pager where the healthcare professional goes through those 5 assessment tools. The SAS is for symptoms, the problems, there are 4 domains for pain, especially important, other symptoms, there are psychological and spiritual, and also this is unique that it involves the family as well. So this is about, does the family have any concerns about the care the resident's receiving? So it really does bring in and involve the resident's family. There's pain check there as well for those aged care homes who are using it, especially for people, again, living with dementia. The AKPS is there, the RUG-ADL, and the phase, as mentioned, there are 4 phases. There is stable, means business as usual. There is deteriorating, meaning we might need to review the care plan and just make sure it's still covering their needs. There is unstable and terminal. They're 2 phases, and as I just described, it's talking about the clinical situation the resident's in and how urgently do I need to address their care plan to meet their needs. So that's what the phase is talking. It's always done at the end of all assessments because all the assessments inform what phase you need to allocate to the resident. And then the phase is what determines the frequency of ongoing assessments, the full clinical assessment by clinicians. So if it's unstable or terminal, obviously resident needs are driving that. They should be reviewed daily. If they're deteriorating or stable, that means they can be reviewed weekly, but that's at a minimum. Of course, you can always review more often if you feel the need. So the 4 steps in the process, as mentioned, episode start and end, 1 at the start, 1 at the end. Full clinical assessment is done within 24 hours of starting outcomes, and then weekly or daily, depending on phase. And if they have leave, it's before and after, because that informs handover and also ongoing care. SAS, as mentioned, the symptoms of every resident are monitored daily, And of course, the snapshot is in 3 months, every 3 months. So the ARP protocol is basically assess, respond, plan. So we assess according to the protocol, weekly or daily for full and daily symptoms. We respond using this protocol. So the protocol is actually a guide. So for every score you come up with in an assessment, it has a guide for the appropriate response for every score. We don't have time to go through that all today, but certainly services are facilitated through that with a lot of quality resources. And then the plan component is really focused on what it's all about in aged care, is ensuring the resident's care plan is up to date and is actually anticipating very near future needs, but also addressing current needs. So it's how quickly that needs to be done. So it guides, the ARP protocol guides clinicians through evidence-based palliative care provision, as I said, based on the results from all of the assessment tools they've done. And the ARP protocol also provides a really detailed guide about considerations for terminal care. So it really helps. This is a wonderful way to build confidence, build skills in staff that don't have a strong understanding of palliative care. So the ARP protocol, as mentioned, is resident-centered, as all assessment frequency is based on their needs. And we've already talked about that every day their distress or concern from symptoms is monitored on a daily basis once they're in outcomes. And then healthcare professionals will assess weekly or daily, as I mentioned, depending on if they're in the unstable or terminal phase, that will be daily, because it is driven by resident need. It is the outcomes program, like the profile collection, is fully supported by a range of things. People such as Laura, who's one of our improvement facilitators. Every aged care home gets a designated improvement facilitator that walk them through implementation, embedding and sustaining the PACOP program, because we know and believe in this program so much. That every aged care home is entered into a community of practice for ongoing support through the process. And there's a wide range of education resources, online, physical resources, video resources, PowerPoints, presentations. But I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that there's a comprehensive guide for everything. So here you can see a snip of the clinical guide for the outcomes program. It's very detailed and very long, but we also acknowledge that aged care home staff, time is so precious. And so we've listened to their feedback and we've created a range of smaller chunking of resources so that they can grab little bits here and there when they have 10 minutes of time. And hence that's why we've developed the clinical bites, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So for every comprehensive guide, there's a smaller brief version so that clinical care for residents can happen sooner, but it's still, they get the most bang for their buck. And then later on, they always can refer back to the more comprehensive guides. So they're also supported by physical resources such as lanyard cards. So here you can see an example of the ARP protocol really chunked down to help staff know what the protocol guide would suggest how to respond. And I've already shown you the SAS ruler. So this is an example of the SAS ruler for care workers that helps them know how to respond based on assessed scores. And then here you can see the SAS and problem severity and an appropriate response. And there's information about phase. And also the RUG-ADL and AKPS scores are there as well. So it just helps you start to consider how you should be responding to the resident scores that you've just assessed. So participation in the outcomes program really is about meeting every resident's palliative care needs and also anticipating their needs, not just about meeting them as they arise, but anticipating what might be coming. And that's really important. But the other really cool thing that the outcomes collection does is by default, by just merely participating in it, you are addressing some really important aged care quality standards. Now, the aged care quality standards have just released their quarterly review on non-compliance. And I just thought, wow. And as I was looking at the results, I thought, oh, how much it related to this presentation we're doing today. So what they found in their most recent report, and the link is there for January to March of 2022, is that the highest level of non-compliance was related to standard 3, which is personal and clinical care. And I just thought I'd highlight how wonderfully, like that, and I know I sound like I'm selling it, but I actually believe in this, how wonderfully that the profile and outcomes collection in the whole PACOP program supports, especially even standard 2 and 3. Standard 2 is ongoing assessment and planning of care with residents, and standard 3 is the personal and clinical care. And, you know, this latest report showed how there was a high level of non-compliance with safe and effective clinical care. You know, the outcomes will cover end-of-life care, recognition of deterioration is covered in both outcomes and profile. And so timely and appropriate referrals are covered there as well. So I think it's a really timely point to make that it's really just participating in PACOP is helping to address and meet those needs. So it is 10:30 now, and some people may have had to switch off, but thank you for your questions. Thank you for coming along today. Are there any questions, Laura, that have come through?
Hi, Janelle. Yes, we did have some questions come through that were registered via email before the session.
Oh, nice.
One of them was, how does PACOP help with terminal care plans? And I think we've alluded to that a little bit in our clinical care guide.
Yeah, so the clinical, the outcomes clinical guide has a detailed section on considerations for each home to, once they've made the decision, okay, this resident is now terminal, it's got a comprehensive guide and a range of considerations for all of the aged care home staff to consider together as a team and with the family of the resident. So for those who are not so confident, there's a complete guide there to help them guide them through that.
Thanks, Janelle. One of the other questions we had was, can you explain more about the whole team approach and the role care workers play?
Oh, yeah. So, and PACOP does use a whole of team approach because they acknowledge the essential work that care workers do and they do so much work, and they actually know the residents really well. They know their concerns because they're talking to them as they're doing their routine care. So in acknowledging that, we have introduced that the SAS can be the symptom assessment, or really symptom monitoring, is completed by care workers in the outcomes collection because they are having that routine daily contact. But the whole of workforce is included with the response protocol, because it gives the care workers the confidence and it empowers them to talk, to advocate for the resident, but also report up to the clinician that is in charge on the day. So, and then the clinician can actually, it creates that whole circular approach where care workers are involved in ongoing care and assessment of residents.
Absolutely. And I want to add too, Janelle, this concept isn't new in aged care. It's just that we've given it a new name. A lot of homes use things like the stop and watch tool, and that uses a whole team approach with enrolled nurses and care workers. And this is really just different in the fact that we're looking at quality of life and these palliative care ideas. Instead of a medical issue or a medical symptom, we're giving them a tool to escalate those really things that are going to add quality to their residents' life. And it's just a different framework, but it's still the same process.
Yeah, you've absolutely captured it, because the SAS is about what really matters to the resident. That's what I love so much about it. And it's the care workers that are going to know those things that are really bothering them. I had one question come through as well about, can you just start with this? Can we just do the outcomes, or do we need both? And actually, that's a great question. So as mentioned at the start, every aged care home, the whole of, to get the full benefits of PACOP, you will participate in both profile and outcomes. But most of the time, aged care homes start with the profile because it's more doable. It's every 3 months and one assessment and the deteriorating tool, of course. And then they get used to the tools that are all used in the outcomes collection. So it builds their confidence. And then usually after a brief amount of a few weeks or a month or so, they can start with the outcomes collection. However, having said that, homes can be facilitated to start with both simultaneously. So it's really up to the aged care homes, and we wanted to make it flexible so that PACOP is a really inclusive program that it's open to every aged care home, regardless of resources or, all that sort of stuff. So just on that, I just wanted to highlight as well, we've got our Clinical Bites series, which is on the YouTube channel there. There's a link there that you can click on, and they give the short chunks of learning that the aged care homes have really enjoyed as part of just simple handover. They're all less than 10 minutes. There's our contact details there. And of course, as you know, we're fully funded by the Australian Government Department of Health to just really standardise palliative care and aged care and improve outcomes for all residents and their families. And we want to thank you for your time today. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Janelle. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next month when we talk about PACOP and the ANAC.
Thank you. Bye.